Well, hello and welcome to the On It Not In It podcast, the interview series. I'm your host, Todd Eppert, and today I'm joined by Henry Boggs, who's the owner of MRB Services. Henry, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to kick us off with a brief background as to who you are and what you do?
Absolutely, Todd. Thank you for the opportunity of talking with you this morning. Uh, so I own MRB Services, which is a company that I'm building out as a financial coach. Also, will bring in business coaching into that. Previous to MRB Services starting, I was the owner and president of Concept Manufacturing. Started with $15,000 and built out a $2.1 million manufacturing company doing labor-only services for people like Booster Brush and Truck Labs.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us. So you've done what a lot of our listeners will hope to do, which is build that business and be able to financially exit from that business, which is awesome. So love to ask more about that. So just let's start from the very beginning, though. What led you to take $15,000 and start a business? What was the entrepreneurial push for you?
I'd always wanted my own business. I mean, it started back on the bus at school. I'd buy, 10-cent suckers during the day and then sell them for 25 cents on the bus, so always had that bug, that would have been around the sixth grade. Life, you get scared at the beginning of life and you just go to work and work for somebody, but it was always in the back of my mind and I was always looking at opportunities. Was right at 40 years old and decided I was ready to jump out on my own. I had 15,000 in the bank, was exiting Toyota, Boschco at that time. So I started out with doing some consulting and realized that I couldn't get rid of the manufacturing bug and just really just looked for the opportunity to get into manufacturing.
Awesome. Yeah, love that. So you worked at W-2 for a while at Toyota and then built up a little bit of a let's store 15,000 and then jumped into that entrepreneurial leap. So so I think that's a common story for some of our folks that listen. They're they were W-2s and now they're trying to make that leap, or maybe they're trying to guess on how to do that. So I know this is common, but when you're a W-2, you think, man, I'd love to have my own business so I can do it my way. Yeah. So what are some common misconceptions that you had coming in that you realized once you started your business?
Well, you think you know it all when you first jump in, and then you realize that you don't know much of anything. I'd always been in operations engineering side of the businesses, understood P&Ls, but when you really start talking about the IRS, accountants, going to the banks and dealing with financial matters on that side from lending, you get a rude awakening real quick.
That's awesome. So tell us about some of the things that you dealt with. So you exited recently from concept manufacturing. So that was about a 7-year journey for you from start to finish. What are some of the challenges that you had to overcome, particularly as you got to that table to sign the papers and sell?
Yeah, so in the beginning, you're just scrambling for anything. So we did sorting and rework. We did some 3PL, unloading trucks, just everything along the line until we could actually get into what we wanted to. And one of the things I learned really quickly was you have to be flexible, right? You can go into it with a very narrow mindset, but if you're going to be successful, that changes really quickly. And in the middle of my journey, COVID hit. So we really had to be flexible during that time. And that's where the 3PL and some other things came along that were never in our mindset of doing. But I really built a business on labor only, contract manufacturing. So we brought in rotomolding for about 13 or 14 months for a couple customers. We brought in the machines, hired the people, and then ran it until they got their businesses up and going. And then we exited those out. We sold the rotomolders. That was one of the few times that we've owned equipment, but that was part of the deal. With Booster Brush and Truck Labs, they own the material, they own the machines. I have the people, the space, and the management team to do that. But what that taught me is being flexible was everything. There was a lot of people that stayed very rigid during COVID, and they've struggled really badly. Not that we didn't struggle, but that was. Our flexibility helped us. And then understanding that there are times that a business is going to change and you have to be able to look ahead and see what the future holds and be really honest with yourself. And that's where I was at with exiting is it was time. I could have held on emotionally to certain things. But I saw a greater opportunity for the business and the people that worked for me being able to sell the business and go into a bigger firm, that had more resources than I had.
Excellent, excellent. So you just talked a little bit about change, and obviously the business landscape is constantly evolving around us. The pandemic hit everybody the same way, or pretty much the same way, but there's always outside forces that are causing us to adjust and adapt. So I'd like to ask a different kind of question. So how are you going to leverage your learning to now pivot into your financial coaching business strategy? Are there anything that you'd be willing to share with our listeners? Maybe I'll call it drop a little candy for our listeners on some things that you might recommend that they do to help to stay innovative.
Absolutely. First, plan out your next 5 moves, right? Patrick David's book, was a huge influence on that. I kind of jumped in it and didn't even understand what I wanted to do for business. I just wanted to have a business, and I didn't take time to plan it out, right? So I did a lot of things myself that very could have easily been done through fractional. We really got into the fractional CFOs, HR, those type of things. Back in the day, if I would have just hired an assistant admin, for 20 hours a week, would have been a whole lot of stuff taken off my plate. And I think that's what entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs, really miss out on, is there are fractional people out there that really help move your business forward, that the cost is very negligible.
Yeah, I love that thought. And I work with a lot of entrepreneurs as well, and that is a really common thing. It's like, what do you want to pay yourself? And if you're doing work that you would pay somebody a lot less money, then go hire that person, right? Is I think what you're talking about there, Henry. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you mentioned a little bit about kind of your future plans. You're kicking off this financial coaching thing. So talk about it a little bit. What does it look like for you? Do you have set any goals for yourself? Have you planned those next 5 steps out again, that you can share openly with listeners? I don't want you to share anything confidential, of course, with our listeners.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Pretty transparent with this stuff as much as possible. So for right now, I understood that I really missed the mark by not understanding the financial side. P&L was great, but really digging into how chart of accounts and everything like that worked. I depended too much on an accountant. So first thing before I really get the business rolling is going and taking a record keeping, bookkeeping class at the local college. Really digging in more on the QuickBooks side. I think too many times we just go out there and we know just enough to get ourselves in trouble, and we really don't deep dive in. Finishing up the Dave Ramsey financial coach piece, so that people have that understanding that you did have it for certification, but really just building the basis of that business right now.
Excellent, excellent. So again, I think you see a need in the entrepreneurial space. Oftentimes entrepreneurs have a very creative idea, service, a product of something. They jump into business, and then by the time they get their first set of financials, their accountant throws it at them, and I think they just assume they're supposed to know what it says, right? And
yes,
so
sir.
You're going to really help people understand. And I hear you talking about chart of accounts, like cash flow analysis and things like that, to make sure you're planning for your future. And is that what I hear you saying, Henry?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a really good space. I mean, from my own experience, I think that definitely you're seeing a felt need in the space. And like most entrepreneurs, when you see a need, you build a business around it, and that's how you grow, right? That's great. So, one final question for you, and that's, think about our inspiring entrepreneurs, those folks that are maybe still sitting in their W-2, or maybe they're coming out of school, whether it's college or high school, and they're thinking, do I really want to go work for somebody else? What advice would you give to those folks now that you've done the W-2, you've done the business ownership? What advice would you give them, as they're starting out their journey?
Somebody coming out of college or high school that's really looking at it. Just had a conversation with a young man last week, and that told him, said, jump out there on your own before you get a W-2 of any magnitude, because once that easy money's coming in, then it's hard to jump out away from that. And for somebody that's like me, that I was 40, making over 6 figures. And when I first jumped into the business, I went to making $250 a week. Is you can't be afraid. You just have to have a plan, right? Just make sure you have a better plan than I had. It all worked out well, but plan out your steps, understand where you're at, but don't be afraid to jump out there. There's a lot of opportunities if you plan correctly.
Yeah, I love that. And that secret around the whole, boy, once you get the W-2, it's really nice to rely on the consistent paycheck. Taking the risk when you have less to risk is a good idea. So if you've got that bug, if you used to cut grass or pick up yards or do landscape, whatever you did as a high school kid, and that's something that really I like working on my own. Take the chance now, right? I was 45 when I kicked off my entrepreneurial journey. I understand I was a W-2 for a long time. So I can definitely resonate with that. And the funny thing is now I would never go back to the corporate world, right? So,
Right.
so I think we think alike, Henry. So hey, I want to thank you for your time today, Henry. Really appreciate all that you've shared with our listeners. Thank you for joining the show. Great meeting you and learning more about your entrepreneurial journey, both the first one and the exit, as well as where you're going into next. And to everyone watching, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thanks again, Henry.